Okay, so I would like to welcome you all to the, the third of the webinars, the student webinars. And I want to talk a little bit about particularly the future of sustainable construction in the CIB. There's been, the CIB in the late 1990s decided on sustainable construction as one of the priority themes. And a number of things come out of that, which I will discuss. But recently there was a standing back and saying, but do we still need to talk about sustainable construction? So is sustainable construction still a relevant topic for us, or has it become such a mainstream thing that we no longer need to do research on sustainable construction? Do we need to move on from it? And as you can see, between the period of 1992 and 2002, a number of things have happened in the field of sustainable construction. It started off with the much broader Agenda 21 and the Habitat agendas, which were the international agendas. And then the CIB in 1998 said, we also want to put together Agenda 21 specifically for sustainable construction. And the document grew out of that, and at that stage, there was still a vast difference between how sustainable construction was seen in the developed world and how it was seen in the developing countries. So, because the CIB and UNEP then commissioned an Agenda 21 specifically aimed at sustainable construction in developing countries, and that was published in 2002 at the World Summit for Sustainable Development. And these two agendas put forward a number of things. It talked about stakeholder actions. It talked about what are the kind of environments that needs to be created, that we need to bring in sustainable construction or sustainability in the curricula of all the built environment professions, and that we need to do certain kinds of research. And what were those kind of research? And particularly it was around things like new materials, around energy efficiency, around resource efficiency. And as these things start to develop, other role players come in as well, and we can see that there's been a tremendous growth in the understanding and the need for things what has now become called green building, which is slightly different from sustainable construction. But we're using the green building growth rate as a proxy to tell us how sustainable construction has been adopted internationally. And we can see that internationally there is a growing market share in terms of green building. Yes, it starts from a very small base, but you can see how it is growing at an exponential rate. Another proxy is to look at the World Green Building Councils, and we can now see how many new green building councils have been established all over the world, and how many new green building councils are coming in. And we can see that although a number of them started off, of course, in the developed countries, Australia, the US, the UK, and Europe, we can see that there are now also green building councils in what is traditionally seen the developing countries, in Brazil, in South Africa, in India, and that there are some that are being established or that are associated with green building councils in some of the other parts of the world as well. So we can see how green building and sustainable construction is becoming a mainstream thing, and that it is no longer a split so much between the developed and the developing countries, but more around how do we implement what is happening and where do we go from here. And you can see how this has grown up to 81 green building councils in total around the world. Then we have in Europe, we have a mandate by the European Union where they want all new buildings to be at least net zero energy. So this is now again going a step up. It's no longer just being more resource efficient. It is about having zero energy. The buildings being able to generate all their own energy requirements by 2018, which is not very far ahead. We'll see how that now comes out, and whether that target will still be met with all the things that have been happening in the global financial market. But we can see that it's no longer a nice-to-have thing. It is becoming a mainstream thing. And in fact, KPMG did a survey of the big construction companies across the globe in 2009 that came out with the result that sustainability is no longer seen as a competitive advantage. It is actually seen as the baseline. It is the very basis of what you need to do, and how do we move on from that. So this is a question that we have to ask ourselves when we talk about sustainable construction and what is the future of sustainable construction in the CIB. Bill Reed, who is an American architect, has been talking about this at a number of the CIB, UNEP, ISB, FIDIC, Sustainable Building Conferences. So we're looking at whether we're supporting a degenerating system or a regenerating system. And a degenerating system requires more and more energy and more resources. And as you move up your systems towards a regenerating system, it requires less energy and less resources. Until it crosses a line where it actually starts producing energy and starts producing resources. So our conventional construction practice sits right here at the bottom, where it is very much a degenerating system. It uses more resources, it uses a lot of energy, it's not particularly aware of its environment. What we call green construction actually still sits at a level that's below the tipping point of where we move into a regenerating system. So in a green construction, we require, or we reduce our energy, we reduce our resource uses, we are more resource efficient, but are we really still sustainable? Because sustainable is the very borderline. It is where we get to a point where we no longer use as much as, where our balance is between the amount of resources and energy we use and what is being produced naturally. So that it should be the very baseline. And what we should be starting to aim for is what goes beyond sustainable, what goes at the top of the line. And recently there's been a lot of talk around resilience and how do we build our systems to be more resilient so that they can respond to all these various changes that we are going to experience. And there has been a very successful CIB webinar series on urban resilience earlier in the year that I invite you to go and look at. Then there is also the notion of how do we restore? How do we take this environment that we have now degraded and start restoring it and start building it up? But there is a third level that goes much higher than that, which is the regenerative design, which is where we say, how do we take the situation where we are in now? We know that climate change has happened. It has had certain implications on our entire biosystems that we rely on. We know that we have got these vast urban areas that we need to do something with, that we need to regenerate in a way where they can contribute to life, where they can contribute to the natural resource base. So it's not just a matter of restoring, but also renewing and allowing our systems to create a world of abundance. Now, today's seminar is around resource efficiency, which you can see sits very much in the green phase, and it is still beneath or below the sustainable line. But the future of sustainable construction sits in those three above the line things, and particularly in the regenerative design and development area. Now, in the CIB, we are busy working on a number of roadmaps for the various working groups and the research areas and the thematic areas. And so we are also building a sustainable construction roadmap. And the first part of this is to determine a conceptual framework. So what is it that we are talking about? And the second part of it sits, where are we today? So we are in the process of developing those two things. And if you have any thoughts on this, we would really like to hear from you as being the people who are out there who come in with the fresh and the new ideas, is to let us think, what do you think is the state of the art and where do you think we should be going? And I would really welcome those kind of inputs and comments. The conceptual framework sits around trying to understand how these new ideas of resilience, of regenerative design and development, how do they relate to what we see as sustainability? How do they relate to current things like resource efficiency, and what do they mean in practice? So we are still working a little bit on that. And there again, we welcome your ideas and your contributions. And the idea is that in May next year, at the CIB World Building Congress, we will have a special event. We will talk through these two aspects of the roadmap, and we hope to have something ready to present at that stage for comment. And we also invite you to participate. That if you are attending the Congress, please come and be part of the conversation. Because out of that conversation, we need to start determining what is the future scenarios, where is it that we want to go, and how do we go there? What would be our strategies for development? And very important is for you as the young and the future researchers is what would be the research agenda for the future that the CIB would support. Another aspect of what we are trying to do in the CIB to engage with this future, understanding our future and understanding where we are, and this links particularly at this point to what is the state of the art, is a CIB UNET webinar series. We've had a first one around resource efficiency in cities, and the recordings of that is available on the web if you want to go and have a look at that. But the idea here is to draw on the expertise that sits already within the CIB and say, what have you done? Where are we now? What is the really good work that has come out? What are the really good technologies or the tools or the processes that we have developed to take us forward? So that's what the webinar series would be. And if any of you know of some really good work that you would like to see featured in this webinar series, again, please let us know. Then there is the Sustainable Building Conference series, and these have been going on for quite a while. The first one was in 1998 in Vancouver, and we're now in the 2013 regional series. We at one stage decided to spread the word a little bit. So there's now a world conference every 3 years, and the next one would be in 2014 in Barcelona in Spain. And then there's a number of regional sustainable building conferences, and you can go and have a look at the CIB website and see if you are still in time to submit abstracts and participate in some of these conferences. And they all build up to the big conference in Barcelona. And part of what we're trying to get out of here is what is the really good work that is out there? What is the work that we would like to feature and to make public and to let the world know, because that is going to help us to further expand not just expand our research agenda, but also to expand the impact of the research that is being done by making it available on a global platform. So the question that I asked in the beginning is, what is the future of the sustainable construction in the CIB for the next 10 years? And I personally think it sits with these new 3 R's that I started to talk about. The resilience idea, how do we make our cities more resilient? How do we create our built environment so that it helps our cities to become more resilient? How do we restore our cities? And then how do we regenerate and restore the infrastructure? How do we sit with all this built environment that we have at the moment that is no longer suited for the kind of climatic conditions that are coming, that is no longer suited for the large-scale urbanization that we're experiencing, particularly in developing countries, where we need to start rethinking our infrastructure in Europe and the US, where a lot of the infrastructure is due for an upgrade. What kind of infrastructure do we put in? So you can see it's not just about the buildings. It's about the entire system that makes up a city, about the infrastructure that sits in the city, but also how would you manage this? How would you deal with the policies that guide these processes of resilience and regeneration and restoration? We've got a lot of work that's been done around heritage restoration, but what we're now talking about is much more than just the restoration of our heritage sites. It is about the restoration of an urban fabric and of the ecological fabric that supports our cities. And then the regeneration is about how do we regenerate this into something that is a new living system. And it ties in with the ideas of thinking of our systems and our built environment as a social ecological system and not just as a technology system. So there's a whole lot of new concepts and new ideas that's coming to the fore that I think can shape a very interesting research agenda for the next 10 years. If you have any comments on this, or if you want to know a little bit more about the initiatives that sit in the CIB, the conferences that you can attend, the webinars that you can plug into, please go to the CIB website. And if you would like to make contact to us, you can contact the CIB Secretariat, and they will send through any of your comments. And we will also have a recording of the comments that you make on this webinar around how you can contribute and what you think we should need to look at in terms of the webinar series and in terms of the new research agenda around sustainable construction. Thank you very much.